The Industrial Revolution began in the late 1700s and ended near the mid 1800s. Before this time period, manufacturing was mainly done in people's homes and things were made individually by hand. Once this time hit, new machines were finally made, including the cotton gin, steam-powered trains, the electric typewriter, telegraph, and many more. Not only was this generation improving machines for factories and mass production, but there were also new creations in the art industry as well. This drastic change in society began in Britain and Western Europe and then eventually became global and was mainly in favor of Western Revolution. The reason for this revolution occurred during long, strenuous work hours in which workers came about with new ideas. During this process, new technology was created for easier work time. One place in particular which rose greatly was Qing, China, from mid-1650 to 1800. As their population increased, so did their productivity. Their population almost doubled, which allowed for more people with new ideas, and this dynamic system is what began the uproar. Since their population increased, they also had to make up for products that everyone was trying to obtain. This led them to creating new ways of manufacture. Chinese advancements spread through international trade, including cotton, textiles, and porcelain. Although China was improving, the rest of Europe was at a major setback considering there was little produced except for warfare epidemics and famine, which cut back the population by 5 million. But the spread of new information after this allowed for the double of population in Europe, and once again put lots of pressure for population control and upkeep of fuel and food. This is where the beginning of the Industrial Revolution has finally begun. The British were the first ones to travel the globe and began the spread of their knowledge and information. While traveling, they were shed light to other cultures and societies like China and France. Their curiosity had taken place in order to find out what would work for them since their society was non-functional, so they looked at others for inspiration. During this outlook of cultures, they grew to see new inventions as well as artworks. All throughout the globe, different artists depicted new styles of art in their interpretations of this revolution. Some showed the darker sides of things, and others focused more on the future and created work with hope, which introduced new styles during the process. This time period for all industries was mainly about experimentation, through curiosity and tinkering, and they shared all of their results, including their inventions and, most importantly, their art. Some new styles came about in order to let others know that there still might be room for improvement and push the crowd to move forward from this time period into the next generations. The first artist I'm introducing will be Claude Monet. In this painting, we see the concept of train stations which were very new to this generation, and it's almost as if Monet was trying to document it in the Gare Saint-Lazare in 1877. The only difference Monet does is how he is truly illustrating it. He is using a new style known as Impressionism. This new style is one that focuses more on the light and colors in the scene that make up the piece as a whole rather than making it seem clear. Not to say that this piece loses its detail, but its more generalized idea of the scene. New colors and styles are finally created as a result of this revolution. In the second piece, we see, through Impressionism, the beautiful, peaceful scene of a calm, everyday workday. Monet shows the beauty and serenity of the working person as they're sailing through the water. Despite all the bad that occurred in the Industrial Revolution, Monet tries to show a more positive side of things using warm, muted colors and soft strokes in this impressionistic styled piece. This type of art is drifting more towards a more modern style and influences others worldwide to take on this style. Now, with railroads, this is possible to share locally and can be reprinted multiple times with the mass-producing machines. Another impressionist that became inspired during this era was Vincent van Gogh, most likely one of the more popular artists today because of his Starry Night. In this oil painting, we are shown a number of people picking from a vineyard. The increase in international trades allowed for a boom in each industry. In this case, since this painting was made in France, we see that these people picking from a vineyard in order to sell their crops, specifically grapes. We can also see some tools being used in the process and a wagon in the background. Van Gogh is another artist who is breaking from art standards and is finally making paintings including or depicting the everyday worker / person, which was taboo at the time. Factories were showing up more and more in societies globally. Because of the creation of the steam engine, mass production was heavily increased. The creation of this allowed for an easier paced time during working hours. Since these workers had more free time during and after work, they could finally make way for hobbies such as art, and this free time is usually when spreading of work and ideas would occur. Another major improvement in this time was the rise of coal, which allowed machines to be powered longer, and we can see the smoke coming from these factories, which were powered from this fossil fuel. In this painting, we can see the foundation of the future to come. This large painting, made in 1886 by artist George Seurat, depicted people relaxing in a suburban park on an island in the Seine River. We can see a definite style change in clothing. The boom in mass production allowed for new clothing to come about in large quantities at a faster rate. Introduction of the department store came from this, and not only clothes were mass produced, but also cars and other everyday products. More leisure time was spent as a result of new machines taking the heavy workload off of people. All the way on the other side of the world, we can see that the next artist, Utagawa Hiroshi, a Japanese artist, started to put his own spin on traditional styled work. All the contemporary artists had an effect on others globally. The spread of ideas challenging traditions allowed others to finally think differently and break from their molds. As we see in Meguro Drum Bridge and Sunset Hill, 1857, and Cherry Blossom Time in Nakachino of Yoshiwara, 1849, we are shown a more traditional style of art. Although mass production of artwork is starting to occur, Hiroshi admired the uniqueness of individual one-of-a-kind pieces. He strayed away from new modernized form of art and wanted to stick to tradition by doing so. The only modern aspect in his work would be the addition of everyday people instead of a higher-powered figures depicted in art. Usually, in this society, only the higher class or important individuals will be shown in art, and this is a newer idea added to a traditional style of piece. The final artist I'm introducing is Kathay Kollwitz. Although there was many breakthroughs throughout this time, as well as many pitfalls, the population of families increased due to the decrease of danger in factories, the rise of certain technologies that help families, and increase in crops as well. The drastic change in population also carried its negative factors, considering that they had to keep up with the multiplication of population. This allowed for less jobs to be available because everyone was looking for something to work in. Families were growing and no income was being made, which caused a backup in the economy and negatively affected the situation of living for most. In these next pieces of work, we can see how Kathay Kollwitz tried to shed light to these tough times after the revolution. In this first piece, Death, made in 1894, we can see the dramatic aftermath of what the Industrial Revolution created. As a great of an uproar it was, the population growth was too much to uphold, and that plus the spread of disease and lack of supplies led to this dark outcome, a mother watching her child die in front, and the sickly family in the back mourning. This next piece is dealing with a similar situation, as it is not that uncommon during these times. This etching is of a woman also grieving after her child has died. Although we do not know the exact reason of death, we can still come to the conclusion that it was lack of supplies or even due to famine or disease spreading. This piece, Woman and Her Dead Child, is one of her many pieces in which she explores death of all kinds and wants to give a word out to others and let them know, through her art, what is actually happening in the world without holding back. We can see that the artist has her own style of art. She is also using expressionism in all of her work. This style of art is one in which these artists try to focus on emotions that they want to exude, rather than focusing on realism or detail of the external world. This piece, Widows and Orphans, made in 1919, shows that because of the Industrial Revolution and the start of new technology and inventions, can also bring the bad, in some. War machines that were invented later on after the Industrial Revolution were only possible because of this foundation. The simple concept for machines in the mid-1800s that allowed for mass production in factories was later used for the mass production of war weapons in the 20th century. Although the impact was not sudden in the 1800s, it carried over to the future and was ultimately its own enemy even in today's society. We have seen a range of art from Impressionism, Expressionism, and Realism, and a new array of new techniques came about during this period. as well as many new supplies and tools used in the pieces are now made available. The spread of information, knowledge, and supplies was the major reason why art became bigger than it already was. Without this connection from location to location, there would be a separation in the art community, and now we can take others' work and compare and contrast, and ask more questions due to this revolution. New colors for painting came about from this era, new tools and access to these tools, techniques old and new, were finally shared. New chemical processes paved the way to photography, manufactured tube paint made painting more mobile. Directly or indirectly, there was still an impact in art, in all aspects of living, and modernized the world for generations to come.